I guess we'll get started. A little smaller of a class today, but we're going to be doing everything going from Claude and going into automations. So last week we talked a little bit. Let me share my screen first. Uh, you also have the link so you can follow along if you want. On Okay, so last week we talked all about Claude, all their different models, their features, how we can use the memory, projects, uh, artifacts, styles, and then like how we can use the newer features like dispatch and schedule to have automated scheduling of tasks through Claude. So that was our first step, but there are significant limitations to this setup because when we do this through Claude, it can't really do multiple steps and it can only trigger on a time base. So we're gonna go a little deeper into automations and how we can find more flexibility in that, in the different ways that we can trigger them, in the ways that we can run them so that they are more powerful. So we're going to start with the core building blocks of automations. The first one that's probably the most important concept to understand when we build automations is APIs. So let me see this poll. Okay, so about half of you use APIs, and the other half either have never or don't really understand. So you can think of APIs as like I'm going to use like a restaurant as an example, right? So when you go to a restaurant and you want to eat something, right? You don't just walk into the kitchen and take the food and eat it and leave, right? So you have somebody in between, which is the waiter. The waiter has you have to tell the waiter, "Hey, I want to order 5 chicken nuggets," and the waiter has to go and dispatch that order to the kitchen. The kitchen comes back to the waiter, and then the waiter brings you your 5 chicken nuggets. Right. So that's like in essence, that's what an API is. It's where you are asking for something specific from a usually like an entity or a company or something, and it'll return with whatever you're requesting, as long as it's within what their API is able to handle. Right. And the format that it returns it in is it's called a JSON. Um, Let me just show you what a JSON looks like. This stuff may seem a little intimidating at first, but it's no different from like an Excel sheet or something, right? You can kind of think of every time you indent, right? So each time you indent, it's like going, how do I explain it? It's kind of like another row, right? It's like you have these lines and then it's just rows and columns. It's kind of more has more dimensions to it because you can nest multiple things. So you can have like a subcategory of a subcategory of the data, but it's not really that crazy and you shouldn't be intimidated by this, but you can always just feed this back into AI as to like get an understanding of what the data actually is. You can always ask AI to turn it back into a spreadsheet or some format that is easy to understand, right? There's no need to be reading this stuff. This is the standard of how data is delivered on the web. So this is something you should just get used to and familiar with. Yeah, so pretty much all APIs will return a status code usually, which is it's an HTTP status code, which means that it's a universal form of status code for web applications. I will add this to our lesson plan after, but I'll just show you guys. Okay, so this is pretty much all it is. Like usually you'll just get a 200 and that's okay and you're good. And then the other ones are they'll tell you if maybe you're unauthorized, maybe you don't have maybe you need like a authentication key for accessing it, or 404 means it's not found. 500 usually means that they messed up something on their side. Yeah, so you can based off of the response code, you can figure out whether or not your request has succeeded. And then along with that response status code, you'll get the JSON, right? So the JSON will contain all the data you're asking for. So let me show you an example here. So this is an API call. This one is an API call specifically to CoinGecko for Bitcoin's price. So So you can see that it basically returns a whole bunch of numbers. Normally, if you visit an API endpoint, it won't actually render anything, but some of them will show you something like this. But usually you would have to explicitly make an API call. I'm going to show you how you do that later in order to retrieve this data. It'll put it together while we continue. Right. So you just keep it simple. APIs is you request for something and you get a response. The response either has it or it doesn't, and then it contains the data that you want. So this is how we interact with different applications that are external to what our own system has. Right. So if I want to interact with Gmail, that would be an API. If I want to interact with Instagram, well, Instagram's is a little bit different. They don't really have like public APIs like that. But if you want to interact with any external service, it's always going to be through an API if we're building automations. The only exception is when something does not have an API. And in those cases, we try to use browser automation, where it basically means that your bot can take screenshots of what the browser looks like. It'll actually navigate the browser as if it's a human using the mouse and keyboard, and it'll try to get to where it's trying to go. But that's like it's very unstable. It's if they change the browser just a little bit, it might break. So we usually avoid that as much as possible and st use the APIs. So here I have this is just a simple prompt to allow you to understand APIs. So sometimes you might come across a service that has an API. It can get pretty technical. So let's see. For example, Stripe, right? Stripe has one of the most, it's both complex but well documented APIs. So everybody's API will have a documentation page if it's like a officially available and like well maintained API, right? This has all these different endpoints. So each individual endpoint has its own calls. This documentation actually provides the exact code that you can run to test out the API. So this, I don't think I'm going to get too deep into this. Basically, this allows you can copy and paste this into like a terminal, and then you can just run it, and you will make an API call, and it'll talk directly to their servers. So yeah, the if you have used this prompt, you can either just say the tool or service name, or you can pass in an actual API documentation. There is one thing to note is that when these AIs reference documentation, if the documentation newer, is less than a year or two old, you may get some mixed answers. It may try to reference a API from a year or two ago. So it's best if you can give it the actual new up-to-date document if possible. But yeah, so this is how you can kind of explore APIs and what you can do with APIs. There's sometimes APIs do not have the full functionality of what you have when you use the user interface, but you can, the, which is the reason you would want to explore to understand what it can do. Okay, so the next part, I'm sure you guys have heard of this before, but it's not. This is very new. It's a little confusing. It's kind of just an extension of APIs. What MCPs are, it's the Model Context Protocol, is a layer that allows an AI agent to understand an API. So the API already has like all this like documentation and instructions. Um, so it, but this is another layer on top of it that tells the API, I mean, tells the AI agent what endpoints we can call for specific things, right? So it's like the translator for the AI. Right, so basically it enables the AI to automatically trigger API calls and retrieve data without like any kind of coding, without any manual work. As long as it has access to the MCP, you can think of it as having direct access into that service that the MCP is for. So we will be using MCPs and APIs to connect Claude and other AI agents to all the services that we want to extract data from, or if we want to run tasks through them. So I'm just going to show you guys how the MCPs work in Claude. Wait, is it the same as connectors in here? One sec. I think they, let me check. Claude might call it something a little bit different. I'm pretty sure it's just the connectors actually, but apparently it is different. Oh, okay, it's in developer. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what these, let's see. So this is a little bit technical, but you can absolutely just ask Claude to make you these. Like you can take MCPs from online, you can throw them into Claude and just be like, hey, I want to add this into my Claude MCPs server, and it'll create this file so that you can add it in. So this is actually Claude's own config. Let me see if I can. Okay, it's the same as extensions actually. So you can also just drop MCPB files here, which is a format of MCP that you can have Claude export for you. But you can also browse these extensions. They are the same thing. If you just download one, it'll download the MCP server for it. Right. So, right. So sometimes when we download these MCPs, you still have to authenticate from the application side. there's often an API key that is associated with it. Um, Let me just show you guys how this works. Let's see. Yeah, I guess I could just show you guys how Claude has their own. So it's usually just buried somewhere in the settings. So usually inside the settings, there's going to be a area that says API keys, or you could just search for it, and you just have to create an API key. And for non-technical people, this is basically it's like a password. You're creating what it's called a private public key pair, where there's one key that you can share with another application and one that you keep private for like it's basically your password, right? So I generated one. I'm gonna delete this one, but let me see. So you can see the API key. You just copy this into the authentication details of it, and it will give the AI access through the MCP to use this API key and the API. So this is generally how you would get access to external services using the MCP, the API, and the API key. Yeah, so these are some just popular ones. MCP is actually able to, I'm not sure if this works on Windows, but on Mac it can read, search, and manage the files on your computer. It can directly interact with the file system. With Windows, you may have to have some workaround for that. Gmail, obviously, and Google Workspace in general has great MCPs, very well built out. You have like Notion, Slack, and all the corporate ones have pretty good MCPs also, like all the like project management and basically all the corporate tools. So like this is a little bit of a recap. So Claude obviously has some built-in automation tools, but they are not quite as powerful. So we've been over how there's co-work, schedule, dispatch, and computer use. Co-work is capable of many automations, but it is still it can't run off like specific triggers, and it's not as powerful because it can only do one thing at a time. You can do multiple steps, but it is one thing at a time. So obviously these are the easiest to like the Claude automations are the easiest to do right out of the box as they don't really require any kind of additional setup and plugging things in. But we're gonna go into something a little more complicated today. Okay, there's more. We already did this last week, kind of. Okay, so this is where Claude isn't enough. One of the biggest ones that would determine whether or not I am using Claude or a automation platform is the triggers. So Claude, like we showed last week, can be triggered based on time, or you can dispatch it from your phone, but it doesn't have the built-in trigger monitors. So, for example, let's say I want the trigger to fire immediately when I receive a new email from Gmail, right? If I'm working and I need to respond to emails and clients immediately, that's something that I want to not wait until the next morning to check the email, right? So that real-time triggers is one of the biggest ones. 24/7 uptime, it's not really that big of a barrier because we can schedule at any time during the day for Claude, but it is quite a benefit. High volume, it's able to do things in parallel. It's able to take a lot more requests at once as opposed to Claude, which is really meant for like individual one at a time workflows. Um, Kind of made this thing last minute. Okay, so I'm gonna go over a little bit on the automation platforms that are available, but we are going to learn on n8n just because that one is the most flexible and it's the most compatible with Claude at the end of the day. So we have the biggest ones are Zapier. Um, if you're in corporate, this is probably the most common one that you'll have a license to. It's pretty good. It's a lot more user friendly and it's easy to kind of understand exactly what's happening. So they have it's just this like flow builder. So you can kind of just click any tile and add any kind of integration here. So for this example, like I already added this, but like I I added a trigger which was through the Google Business Profile MCP or API, and then I set it to well, the trigger is a new review, right? I set the trigger. You can test it out, so it you can see exactly how the API is returning your data. It's already because Zapier is built for non-technical people. It's already taking the JSON and making it something that's easy to read. So this is a review that recently came in, and yeah. So from this review, you can then pass it into another another block. For example, you can pass it into AI and ask, hey, analyze the sentiment of this review, write a reply to this review that is appropriate to the business and the search engine optimization. And then we can go ahead and we can do another action where okay, I really don't like Zapier, but I'll show you guys an edit and but this is the corporate non-technical version of automation platforms. So it's still useful to understand how this works in case you are restricted to using this. Another one is make.com. This is somewhere in between Zapier and n8n. Has a little more control, a little less corporate, but again, I'll show you guys exactly why n8n is preferred for me. Okay. So the main reason that n8n is so much more powerful is that Claude can build n8n workflows natively, right? It's n8n relies on a JSON importable like workflow, which means that Claude can just pretty much build the entire workflow with you without you having to touch each individual block and set it up. I'm gonna do that with one of your examples in a second, but just yeah, so n8n does have a free self-host version. You can run it on your own local system for free, or you can pay for their cloud tier, and they have a free tier, so you should be able to get most automations up for free until you start running like more more triggers of the automation. And they do have their own visual builder, same as Zapier, but it also has this programmatic builder. And yeah, think we can get straight into the automations from here. Um, let's see. So this is just another prompt for you guys, where when you're ready to build automations, you can tell. you can pass this prompt to Claude, and this is how you would create the base of an n8n automation. So one thing I want you guys to think about when you're creating automations and workflows in general is it's always about the inputs and the outputs. So it's every step of the automation has inputs and outputs, right? The input could be a either a trigger or data that's coming in, and the output is what we're doing to this data, how we're manipulating it, right? So from step one, it might be, let's say trigger is Google review, Google My Business review, and that input is the Google review itself, like the content of the review, how many stars it is, um, all those details, who gave the review. And then from there, we that input becomes an output to the next step, or that output becomes an input to the next step, where we take that and put it into a AI to analyze it and generate a response, and that output becomes the input to the next step, right? So it's just like a flow of different inputs and outputs at each stage. And once you start understanding how you what kind of input you're looking for and what output you're looking for, then it's very easy to describe to AI and build these workflows. All right, so let's get straight into n8n. This this is something that I guess Jared built this. I can kind of show you guys how this works. Actually, wait, let me do the plot thing first. Before we go forward, is anyone lost? Is this too much? I feel like I'm giving you guys a lot at once, kind of. Yeah, any questions while I set this up? Okay, so let's just run one of these. Oh, shit. Okay, I'm out of usage on this one. Let me see. This one works. So let's say let's do like the Google review one, right? I'm not even gonna like follow the whole setup. You don't really, as long as you're able to describe how the flow works, you don't really have to like perfectly adhere to the structure. What am I thinking? Um, oh, the Google review thing that I was just trying to do in Zapier. So this is the same thing that I was trying to do before with, we have the review as the trigger. Claude drafts a reply based on sentiment, alert owners if there's a negative review, reply if more than 4 stars. That's it. So if you just describe the whole workflow to Claude, it should be able to create a JSON file, which will then just be a drop in n8n. So let's create a new workflow. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It'll complete and it'll give you this large JSON with all the workflow. You can download it. And then when you go into n8n, you should be able to just import from a file. This is the three dots on top. Expand that a little bit. Import from file, and then Google Workflow Review. All right.
Can you maybe go back and start with what n8n is, and then like what you're trying to accomplish with the workflow? Like I feel like people are kind of lost. Um, like what the workflow is trying to accomplish, and then how you're using Claude to build the n8n workflow.
Okay. Okay. Let's backtrack a little bit. So n8n is one of these automation workflows, automation platforms similar to Zapier and Make.com that allows you to structure and build these workflows that Claude is unable to do because of certain limitations, such as triggers, for deeper processing, like parallel meaning multiple things at one time. Like you want to run multiple processes at one time. So because of all these constraints in Claude, you you move over to automation platforms like this when you need to do something a little bit more complicated, right? So the reason we use n8n again is because n8n you can generate n8n workflows directly from Claude. So it means you can skip the steps of manually selecting each block and w where you're getting the data from, um, you know, how you're processing the data, the calculations being made, all the logic, all that stuff you don't have to really think about anymore, and you can just let Claude do that for you. n8n also has its own built-in AI editor, which is pretty good too. I'm not sure if it's as good as Claude, but you can tr test that out for yourself. But what we're doing here is so this is a Google review response automation, right? So the goal is that we take, what's to say? Okay. So the goal is that we take that input of the Google business review, as soon as it arrives, which is that's what webhook means. Webhook means that you can subscribe to something like an event. A webhook is so when this event happens, let me know that this happened, right? So if you subscribe to a review webhook, that means every time you get a review from Google, it'll send you a little bit of code, and your system will pick it up and be like, okay, now it's time to start my workflow because I got a review. So that's what webhooks are. This workflow is just showing you how it can take this trigger, process the data, send it to an AI to get a response from it, um, and basically perform different tasks based on the flow of the logic, right? So you can open up each one of these blocks to it. Some of them have code, so they're not as friendly. But for example, this one, right? This one is an API call to Claude, right? We're passing our review data into Claude, and it may come with a question. Let's see if
Probably explain what nodes are.
nodes. Nodes are what I how I describe the like inputs and outputs. each node is a individual process or service or yeah, pretty much a process or a service where you're inputting some form of data and then you're doing some kind of manipulation to it, or you're getting something from somewhere else and then you're outputting a different set of data, right? So let me see. This won't execute because I haven't connected the Google business to this, but you can see that this is just an API call to Anthropic, to Claude. And let me see if I can just expand this. All right, so the Claude has already set this all up for us, where you're telling this is like the master prompt for it to review the reviews and create the replies. Right, so from here, we'll grab the reply text and then we'll check if the rating is greater than 4. If it's greater than 4, we can reply to Google. If it's not greater than 4, we can alert the owner on Slack. Right. Joe, are we essentially making the workflow in n8n Zapier Make, but you're utilizing n8n because Claude can read the JSON and make suggestions to enhance that workflow? Yes, so yeah, pretty much. With Zapier and Make, there's no JSON that's attached to this workflow. There's no like JSON form of this workflow. So you can't really have Claude assist you in making the workflow as much as you can here. And that's just why it's more powerful. You don't have to individually create all these nodes. Let's see. Actually, we could do some of your workflows now. Let's do take a look at Yasmin's. Okay, so Yasmin, you were saying that you want to pull data from Instagram run clubs and create posts for NYC run clubs based on what other people are posting, right? And adding it to nycrunclubs.com.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, this is not quite it. Okay, we have to modify this a little bit. So are there any hashtags that you check for on Instagram?
No. So when I was doing it manually, I just would go to the run club pages that I followed, and then if there's an event, I would write it down, and then I had a newsletter where I would compile all of them and send it out. But it was so much work to do it manually, so I just stopped.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would just search Instagram itself for run clubs, or you know the run club pages.
So I would follow all the ones that were in New York, so I knew which ones to
Okay.
check. Yeah.
Um, I'm guessing New York City Run Club probably will bring some up, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. Let's say like Bandit probably has, right? Just so that we can have some examples. Uh, So th does this kind of make sense? Does this flow? Um, so you're taking all the raw data and then you're creating like Instagram posts for this, and also you wanted to upload to your website, or what else was there? Or did you just want to create like the content
I think
itself?
that's good for now.
Okay,
Just the
so
content. Yeah.
we can run this.
Also, I have a question
Yeah.
about N8N. So if you have an account for yourself and then you have clients, do you just put your clients' workflows on your account or do you have make new ones for them?
So you can have individual organizations here. Okay, so when I logged in, it asked me to type in the workspace. When you first create your account, you can like so here I have a personal one and a ProteusX one for my company, right? So you can create a individual one specific to a client so that it's not like all in one place.